The restaurant my sister chose for her rehearsal dinner was the kind of place where the bread cost $12 and the lighting made everyone look like they were already in love. I had driven 40 minutes to get there in the rain, wearing a dress I'd ironed twice because I wanted everything to be right. I wanted to walk in and feel like I belonged at that table. I should have known better. My sister's name is Becca. She is 3 years younger than me and has always been the kind of person rooms rearrange themselves around. Not because she's cruel, at least not in ways that leave marks you can show anyone. Just because my parents decided sometime around the year she turned 8 and I turned 11 that she was the one worth watching. My nephew stood in my told me the baint, set 7 years old, life. Sit lowly, then all at once. It was the way my mother would introduce us at church. This is Becca, and this is her sister. Not my name, her sister. A satellite in Becca's orbit. It was the way my father would sit through my school presentations, arms crossed, eyes somewhere else. But the following week, he built an actual poster board display for Becca's science fair project, hand lettering the title himself in blue marker. I told myself it didn't matter. Kids notice things they're not supposed to, and I was good at pretending I hadn't. What I did instead of being noticed was work. I worked the way some people pray. Quietly, consistently, with the kind of faith that doesn't ask for anything in return. I graduated high school with a 4.1. I got a partial scholarship to a state school in Virginia. I waitressed every weekend for 4 years to cover the rest, sometimes pulling double shifts on Sundays and going straight from the diner to my Monday 8 a.m. class, still smelling like maple syrup. My parents came to my graduation. They stood in the bleachers and took one photo before my mother said her feet were hurting and could we please go somewhere with air conditioning. I have that photo somewhere. In it, I'm still holding my diploma. My mother is looking at her phone. 6 months later, when Becca got accepted to a design program at a private school in Nashville, a school that cost 4 times what mine did, a school my parents immediately said yes to paying for without a single conversation about budgets or loans. My father toasted her at dinner with a bottle of Bordeaux he'd been saving for 15 years. He said he'd been waiting for a reason to open it. I had gotten stray days the semester before. I didn't mention it. None of this is why I'm telling this story. I'm telling it because of what happened at the rehearsal dinner. At the table my parents had reserved at a restaurant called The Laurel on a Tuesday in October, 3 weeks before Becca's wedding, when my mother slid an envelope across the white tablecloth and told me to open it. I thought it was a card, an olive branch maybe. My mother had a complicated relationship with sincerity, but sometimes she tried, and I always wanted to believe that the trying was real. It was not a card. It was a single page printed on plain paper, but the language was formal in the way that legal things are formal, structured, specific, intentional. It said that my parents were formally severing the financial and legal ties of family relationship between themselves and me, their elder daughter. It said they wished me well. It was signed by both of them. My brother-in-law's younger sister, who was seated across from me and had been talking about her spin class for 11 minutes, stopped mid-sentence. The table went quiet. I looked at my mother. She had the expression she usually reserved for when she was returning something at a department store. Slightly uncomfortable, but committed to the position. "We've been talking about it for a while," she said. "It's not about the wedding. It's just that we feel like our family unit functions better when there's clarity about boundaries. You've always been so independent." My father nodded. He was cutting his bread into very precise squares. Becca said nothing, but she was looking at her hands in her lap, and there was the faintest pull at the corner of her mouth, and I knew her well enough to know that she had known this was coming. Maybe she had even suggested it. I don't know. I have never asked. "Okay," I said. I folded the paper. I put it in my purse. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. My mother blinked. She had been expecting something else. Tears, maybe, or argument. Something she could respond to, manage, redirect. "Okay," she repeated. My nephew stood in my living room. What I did not say, what I had no reason to say because they hadn't asked, because they had never asked, was that 4 months earlier, I had left my position as a mid-level project coordinator at a healthcare consulting firm in Richmond and accepted an offer I'd been working toward for 2 years. I did not tell them that I had spent 3 years building a side project in the gaps of my regular life. Early mornings, late nights, the hours between closing the restaurant and falling asleep, a contract management software platform built specifically for small medical practices that couldn't afford enterprise solutions. I did not tell them I had found two co-founders through a developer community I'd been part of since graduate school. I did not tell them we had spent 18 months in beta with 11 pilot crons, Virginia and North Carolina. I did not tell them that 6 weeks before this rehearsal dinner, a healthcare technology firm based in Philadelphia had acquired our company for just under $4 million, that I had negotiated a continued role as VP of product, that my portion of the acquisition had cleared my student loans, paid off my car, funded a down payment on a condo, and left me with more in savings than my parents had made combined in the last 5 years. I did not tell them any of this because they had not asked. In 32 years, they had not once asked me what I was building. I finished dinner. I congratulated Becca on her upcoming wedding and told her the centerpieces she'd chosen were beautiful, which they were. I hugged my mother at the end of the night, the way I always had, like a person who had learned to hug people she wasn't sure loved her back. I drove home in the rain. I did not go to the wedding. My nephew stood in my living room. I told me bang room on my house next 67 years old. I Robert Sinclair, 67 years old, agonized over publicly. I simply thought about it for about 4 days and realized I could not sit in a church pew and watch my family celebrate while carrying a piece of paper in my purse that said I was not part of it. I sent Becca a gift from her registry. I sent a card that said I wished her every happiness, and I meant it. My mother called twice. I let both go to voicemail. In the first one, she said she was disappointed. In the second one, she said it was very immature of me. I listened to both messages while sitting on the floor of my new condo with a cup of coffee, looking out at a skyline I had paid for myself, and then I set my phone face down on the hardwood and went to bed. What happened next came from a direction I hadn't expected. I had a colleague, someone I'd worked with at the consulting firm before I left, whose name was Arthur Whitfield. He was in his late 50s, the kind of person who wore the same 4 ties on rotation and remembered everyone's birthday without writing it down. He had mentored me in the quiet way that real mentors do, by asking good questions and then actually listening to the answers. When the acquisition closed, he had sent me a handwritten note. 3 sentences. It said he always knew I would do something like this, that he was proud, and that he hoped I would keep going. I had put it in a drawer where I kept things I didn't want to lose. Arthur was connected to a regional business development council that operated across 3 mid-Atlantic states. They hosted an annual dinner, not a loud gala, more of a seated recognition event for professionals under 40 who had demonstrated what the council described as substantive economic contribution to the region. The year I got the acquisition done, Arthur nominated me. I didn't find out until they sent me the formal invitation in January. I had not told my parents I'd been nominated. There was no reason to. I was not in the habit of telling them things. The dinner was held in March at a hotel ballroom in downtown Washington, D.C. It was a Tuesday. There were maybe 200 people in the room, nominees and their guests, council members, a few local elected officials, some press. It was not national news. It was a room full of people who understood what it meant to build something in the margins of a regular life. I had invited Arthur. He was the only person I'd asked. My parents had found out about the dinner through my mother's cousin, who had seen it mentioned in a regional business newsletter she subscribed to. I did not know they were coming until I was standing near the bar 30 minutes before the program started, and my mother appeared beside me in a green blazer I'd never seen before. "We thought we'd surprise you," she said. My father was behind her. He was smiling in the way he smiled at Becca's soccer games when her team was winning. Open, uncomplicated, proprietary. Like her success was also his, automatically, without any work required. "How did you get tickets?" I asked. "Your father called the council," my mother said. "They were very accommodating. We sat at table 9. I looked at my father. He had the specific expression of a man who believes that showing up is the same thing as being there. "Okay," I said. I excused myself to find Arthur. The program started at 7. There were 12 honorees. I was third on the list. When the council director, a woman named Dr. Fontaine, who had the presence of someone who had run large rooms her entire career, read my name, she said it clearly and completely, and then she described the company in one clean sentence: a software platform serving independent medical practices acquired in a 7-figure transaction, with continued operations employing 11 people across 2 states. She said I had built it while working full-time and had done it without institutional funding. The room clapped. Arthur stood up. A few others near him stood too. I walked to the front of the room. I shook Dr. Fontaine's hand. I accepted the plaque, which was heavier than I expected, and I turned to face the audience. I did not look for my parents. I looked at Arthur. He was still standing, and he was nodding slowly, the way he nodded when something confirmed what he'd already known. I said thank you to the council, to my co-founders who weren't there, but whose work was in everything I built, to the clinics that had trusted us in beta when we were still figuring out what we were doing. I kept it short. I meant every word. Then I sat back down. At the end of the evening, when the room was loosening into conversation and people were drifting toward the exits, my mother found me near the coat check. She was holding her clutch with both hands. My father was a few steps behind her. "We didn't know," she said. It was not quite an apology. It was the beginning of a sentence that I think she intended to finish differently, but couldn't find the words for once she'd started it. "I nephew stood in my mind. Why didn't you tell us?" I thought about how to answer that. I thought about the bread in that restaurant in October, cut into precise squares. I thought about the bottle of Bordeaux opened for a college acceptance letter. I thought about a photo where someone is looking at her phone. "You didn't ask," I said. My father started to say something. I saw his mouth open. Whatever he was preparing, an explanation, an apology, a pivot, I didn't wait for it. I had my coat. I had my plaque. I had Arthur standing 10 feet away, ready to go find somewhere that served decent pasta. "I'm glad you came," I said. And I meant that too, in a complicated way, the way you mean things that hurt and are also true at the same time. I walked out. There is no version of this story where everything got fixed that night. My mother called the following Sunday. We talked for 22 minutes, which is longer than we had talked in years. She said she thought they had done a good job, that they had tried, that it was hard to know what a child needed. I listened. I said I understood. I said I understood. I said I needed more time. My father emailed me 2 weeks later. It was 3 paragraphs. The first one was about a home repair he'd done. The second one mentioned, briefly, that he was proud. The third one asked if I would come home for Easter. I did not respond right away. I sat with it for a week, which is something I've learned to do. Sit with things instead of reacting to them. I eventually wrote back a short note saying I would think about it. I have not been back to the house where I grew up. Not yet. I don't know if the timing is right or if I'm protecting something that still needs protecting. What I know is this: the paper my mother slid across a white tablecloth on a Tuesday in October, the one she meant as a door closing, sits in the same drawer as Arthur's note. I kept it. I kept it because it is a document that says, plainly and in writing, that I built everything I have built entirely on my own. That no one helped me. That no one can come back later and say they did. Some people think that's a sad thing to keep. I think it's the most clarifying document I've ever owned. My company still operates. We added a pediatric practice group in February, which brought our clinic count to 30. I have a team meeting every Monday at 9, and I bring good coffee for everyone because I remember what it felt like to work without anyone noticing. I water the plant on my windowsill every Thursday. I have a cat named after a city I visited once. I go to bed when I'm tired and wake up when I'm ready, and my condo is exactly the size I need it to be. I did not build this life to prove something to anyone, but I will not pretend it doesn't feel like proof. The thing about being overlooked for a long time is that you eventually stop waiting to be seen, and you start building in the dark instead. I think about that a lot, not with bitterness, not anymore. More like the way you think about weather that shaped you, a long winter that made you root deeper than you would have otherwise. My parents thought silence meant I had nothing to say. It meant I was saying it somewhere else. What I've come to understand, slowly, the way most real understanding happens, is that the life I have was only possible because no one was paying attention. Every late night I spent building the platform, every beta clinic that trusted us, every conversation with my co-founders about what we were actually trying to do. None of it happened because someone believed in me first. It happened because I believed in it. Because I had enough respect for my own work to keep showing up for it, even when no one asked how it was going. That's the part I want to be honest about because I think people sometimes hear a story like mine and assume there's a moment where the talent just announces itself. There wasn't. There was just Tuesday after Tuesday of doing the next necessary thing, of being wrong about something, figuring out why, and being less wrong the next time, of choosing over and over again to stay at the table I had built for myself instead of begging for a seat at one that had never been set for me. I think about Arthur a lot too. He never told me I was exceptional. He asked good questions and listened to the answers. That distinction matters. What he gave me wasn't flattery. It was attention. Genuine, consistent attention. He wanted to understand what I was thinking, and in doing that, he showed me that my thinking was worth understanding. That's a different kind of generosity than most people realize. It costs something. It's also the kind of thing that compounds quietly over years, the way good character does. Because character, the kind that actually holds under pressure, isn't built in the moment your name gets called in a room. It's built in the moments when no one is calling it. When you choose to do the right thing on a Tuesday at 11 p.m. because it's the right thing, not because anyone will know. When you honor a commitment to 11 small medical clinics because they trusted you, and that trust means something, regardless of whether it ever turns into a headline. What I want, if anyone takes anything from this, don't let the people who failed to see you become the authors of your self-concept. The disownment paper my mother slid across that tablecloth told me nothing about my worth. It told me everything about her fear. Fear of someone she couldn't manage, couldn't diminish, couldn't keep small. The document I'm proudest of isn't the acquisition agreement or the council plaque. It's the record of the years I kept going when I had every reason not to. That's not a document anyone can sign away from you. I stood to water the plant by my window every Thursday. I still bring good coffee to my Monday meetings. I built a life that fits, and I intend to keep living in it.